In this video, I'm going to show you how to value your business in less than 10 minutes so that way you don't get scammed out of your hard-earned money. My name is Raleigh Williams. I'm 35 years old and I sold my first company for $26 million to private equity. But when I first talked to the first potential acquirer, they told me that my business was worth $0, and then a broker told me that it was worth $10 million, and I ultimately sold it for 2.6 times that amount, making 8 figures for myself. I also started my career as a mergers and acquisitions lawyer, so I've sold billions of dollars of companies as an attorney, tens of millions of dollars as an entrepreneur, and so I can show you how to value your business right now. The first thing to understand when you're thinking about selling your business is that no buyer wants to buy a business, they want to buy an asset. And the big difference between an asset and a business is that a business requires the entrepreneur to run it. The business usually encapsulates the entrepreneur at the center of it. You as the entrepreneur, you're selling customers, people want to do business with you, you're the one fulfilling the product, and all of those are great ways to get started as an entrepreneur. But when you want to go and sell the business, you have to be able to show that the business can grow and succeed without you being at the center of it. And that's what an asset is. The asset has to be able to run itself and pay for itself and manage itself and grow by itself without new ownership having to get involved. So we're going to talk about the things that make your business look like an asset. So when I was running my trampoline park and escape room business, the first thing that I did when I wanted to sell my own business is I reached out to a strategic acquirer, somebody that was already in the business that I was in. They were running trampoline parks, and so I thought that if I reached out to them, that they would be able to understand the business and potentially be the people that would pay the most for it. After this conversation that I had, they looked at the business and they told me that the business was worth nothing. They said that I couldn't do anything with it because I was at the center of it. And so going through that process of them telling me that the business was worth nothing to ultimately me selling the business for $26 million, I started to pay attention to the things that I did that made the business valuable for myself. And so I've made a little rubric that we're going to go over in this video to determine what your business is worth and how it looks. At the very center of it is looking at the market that your business is in and the growth rate that you're experiencing. So you can see that there's an X and a Y axis. You're either the market leader or the market follower, and you're either in a low growth market or a high growth market. The market leader means that you are generating more revenue than anybody else in the market, and the follower means that you're not. A high growth market means that the market that your business is in is growing at least 10% year over year, and a low growth market means that the market that you're in is growing less than 10% year over year. So in the trampoline park business, the market was the 10 or 15 square miles around the trampoline park. So for me, the question was, is the population growth within this market growing more than 10 to 15% year over year? And is Airborne, the brand that I owned, is that the leader in the market, or is there another trampoline park that's doing more top line sales than I'm doing? And so in my case, I was the leader in a relatively low growth market. You could see within this chart, a leader in a low growth market, those businesses are cash cows that tend to trade for 2 to 4 times last year's earning, the trailing 12-month earnings. If you're a leader in a high growth market, that's a star business that is high growth. Those tend to trade for 5 to 8x, depending on what the market is. A follower in a low growth market, it tends to be worth nothing. You can't even really give it away. And a follower in a high growth market is undetermined. It's anywhere from 0 to 2x, and you really have to determine whether you want to turn it into a cash cow or into a star business. And so if you want to trade for max value, getting to a star business, how to do that within any particular business, that's when we start going into the peripheral of the graphic, the revenue, the team, the niche, and the product. Those are the things that you can focus on in order to turn yourself into a star business. When you start to look at the revenue that you generate within your business, the question that any buyer has is this one-off revenue? Is this repeat revenue? Or is this recurring revenue? One-off revenue means that the people buy a product or service from you and they don't really intend to come back and do it ever again. That tends to depress your value because you have to do all of this work to go out and acquire a customer. And then as soon as that acquisition cost is paid and you've generated the revenue, there's not a very clear path for them to buy again. If you can show that you have repeat revenue, that you have customers that come to you over and over and over again, even if that's because they love your brand and your brand has brand value, then that tends to increase the value that your business has. And then recurring revenue is this big sexy thing that everybody talks about, and it's very difficult to do depending on the product that you have. In my trampoline park and my escape room business, what we started to do is instead of people just buying at the gate, we started to do memberships that were recurring revenue, that were year-long contracts that you had to cancel if you wanted to get out of them. And so from the buyer standpoint, we went from one-off revenue of people just coming into the gate and paying us one time to recurring revenue. And that was able to increase our exit multiple because to a new buyer, we looked like a safer thing to buy than another entertainment business that was just doing it one-off. We had done all the work to acquire a customer and the revenue was continuing to recur, which made it feel safer to a new buyer. The next thing that a buyer looks at is the team. What is the team that is going to take this business to the next level? At the base level, businesses that tend to be worth nothing, you have a self-employed team. Basically, you have the entrepreneur that's doing the sales, sales and the fulfillment and all of that stuff. Then at the 1 to 2 times multiple, you have an entrepreneur who is out there generating revenue, but has a team behind him that can fulfill. This happens a lot in the trades where you have a guy that starts being very good at putting stucco on the exterior of a house, and then he gets the guys that can do that fulfillment and they do the stucco for him, and then he goes out and sells. It's worth more than him doing all of the work himself. His next step is he has to go from the entrepreneur to the owner and have other people that are in the sales process for him, and that increases his exit multiple, usually from a 2 to 3x up to a 4x multiple as it gets to the owner level. At the very, very top of it, you have investors, because investors own assets, owners own businesses, entrepreneurs work in businesses, and self-employed people basically own jobs. The third category to look at in order to know what your business is worth and how to increase your exit multiple is the product that you have. And in any product, there are 3 key things that you can work on. Is the product replicable? Basically, does every customer get the same experience, or is there a lot of variation within the experience? Is the product valuable? Are you charging a lot more than it costs for you to fulfill it? And then is it sticky? When people experience your product or service, does it entrench the relationship deeper between you and your business and them, right? A lot of times you'll get an entrepreneur that has a certain skill set. If you have an entrepreneur that's a marketer, they tend to be very good at sales and marketing and not very great at the product side and building a product that's replicable, valuable, and sticky. And so a lot of times it can be helpful if you have a skill set that's very product based, where you are very good at building your product. You may tend to need sales help to grow the top line revenue. But if your product isn't replicable, having the same experience over and over again, valuable, the margin, the gap between what it costs for you to fulfill the product or service and then what you're able to charge, and sticky, then you're going to have difficulty. You're going to have slippage in your exit multiple. And so the product is the place that you need to focus in order to get your exit multiple up. And the fourth area of focus is the niche. And this really comes down to, what is the brand of your business? And does that brand sit in a niche that's very clear in the demand of the niche and your ability to get distribution within that niche? And so the place where the niche really comes into a problem and the niche becomes the biggest drag on what the multiple you can get is in this new creator economy where the brand is the person, the brand is the human. So it becomes very difficult for a buyer to look at that asset, that brand asset, and figure out how I'm going to buy this, where the brand is the person that sits at the center of it. And so that's why it's always important to be building the brand as the business, not just the brand as the human. So a good example of this is, if you know Kayla at Signies and Bikini Body Guide, they were one of the first infopreneur people that were in the market in the health and wellness weight loss business that was very influencer driven. They ultimately switched that to the Sweat app. They went from one-off info product sales to recurring revenue in an app, and then they moved the brand and the niche from the influencer of Kayla into the brand of Sweat. That's ultimately took it from an info product business, generated a lot of cash flow but had no exit value, to Sweat, which they ultimately sold for more than a $500 million valuation, because they started focusing on what are the impediments to our exit value that we need to fix. And so if you're at a place where you ultimately think one day you may want to sell a business, and selling a business is a beautiful process because you get all of the going forward profit that you were going to generate for the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, you get it in one day and you get your life back so you can go and do something else. But it does require you to run the business in a different way than just picking up the next bit of cash flow and to just launching the next product that you think can just generate cash the quickest. You have to show that the cash is sustainable, it's durable, and that a new buyer coming in can predict and rely on that cash going forward, because they have to bring debt and leverage to the table. And that leverage, they have to know that the asset, the business, is going to be able to pay for that debt, and the buyer can take the extra payments that sit above their debt payments, and that's the margin that the buyer gets. And so you have to put yourself in the mind of the buyer. Otherwise, you get yourself in the entrepreneur trap where all of the offers for the business are not profitable enough for you to ever want to sell it, right? That's what happens in a lot of info product and a lot of digital businesses, where they say, I make $1 million a year. Why would I sell you my business for $1 million a year? I'll just keep running it. And then you keep running it, keep running it, keep running it, and then momentum slides. You ultimately are stuck with something that you never sell and you can't get max value for, and you just have to shut it down and move on. So I hope you found value in looking at how to value your business and what your business can potentially be worth. If you'd like me and my team's help doing it in your business, check the link in the description and you can book a call with us. The lion's share of how we make money in this business is performance-based. We only get paid when you do. And so it's very little risk if you're serious about wanting to sell your business in the near future.